most businesses can't succeed without their employees, without their team. They need them there to function the day-to-day and to serve their clientele or their mission, whichever it may be. So if part of your team errs on a technology base and you get hacked, you may have insurance to cover it, true enough. What about that team member that made the mistake, a simple mistake that we can all make, that caused that? How are they going to feel? Are they going to feel valued, or that they added value? Are they going to want to come back tomorrow?
So welcome to Learn Online Security Podcast. I'm Tamara Michéle, your host, and today we have David and Valerie McInnes. Nice to meet you both, and thanks for joining us.
You're welcome. Great to be here.
I'm just getting to know you a little bit as well, but I'm wondering for the viewers at home, if you can just tell me a little bit about yourselves and some of the things that you're involved in, because I know you are entrepreneurs and you have your hands or the pans in many fires.
Well, about almost a year and a half ago now, along with a business partner, we opened up a local full-service flower shop and specialty coffee bistro downtown in Dauphin called the Bloom and Bean. And so that's taking up a lot of my time. But as well, David and I have a consulting company called Rare Leadership, in which we help entrepreneurs, small business owners, and actually moving into kind of the corporate world as well, on amping up and taking those steps forward. Also do a bit of contract work on the side for Assiniboine College as a curriculum developer, and then also do some grant writing and some structural governance support for a couple of other organizations.
Along with that, Valerie and I also own a local boarding kennel, and so we will board cats and dogs, our little fur family members. Along with that, unfortunately, we do offer aftercare assistance through cremation of your family pets. And we have just recently started a not-for-profit, and the intent of that is to help support the many rescues and shelters in Manitoba that are currently overwhelmed, overworked, understaffed, and underfunded with the pandemic of homeless cats and dogs that we seem to have currently. So with all of those things, it keeps us a little busy.
Yeah, it sounds like more than the average bear, you know? That's kind of what I want to say.
We haven't boarded a bear yet.
So I guess keeping in with how important is it to train your staff and to know that your staff are trained when it comes to the cyber world and technology and the internet? Training
and ongoing training, from my standpoint or my belief, it's paramount. We don't get into business to be there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We hire our team members to support the mission and the vision of whatever venture it is that we're in at that point in time, and then we trust them to do that. But if we want to trust them to do that, we also have to, empower them to make decisions and give them the tools and the resources to make those decisions. And if your ventures at all deal with technology, one of the scariest things in the world right now is getting scammed or getting hacked, having your identity stolen, or malware, whatever it's called when they ransomware. Those things they're on people's minds. Every time you turn on the TV, you're either talking about tariffs or you're talking about technology that's gone bad or somebody's used in a bad way. So giving them the tools and the resources to be comfortable and confident in what they're doing and feel secure in it, it's invaluable.
We'd had a short discussion before, and you mentioned something really valuable that I want to kind of return to. And that's about the fact that a lot of your staff and the people that work with you are remote. So what challenges does that pose?
I've realized over the last little while, because of the contract work that I do, I'm working for several different entities across the province. So each one of them have different standards of security within the organizations. And even with high levels of security, they're still having issues. And I think it's so important because a lot of the other staff that I work with don't know. They don't know what to do. They're working from their home computers. Some cases, we're getting materials from whoever we're working for, but a lot of the time you're working with your own laptop or your own computer. And if you're not set up properly, you're putting your employer's information at risk. And so I think it's just so important for everybody to be knowledgeable on what even minimum standards need to be for security of the materials that you're creating or the files that you're accessing through different shared cloud services, because there's so many of them that everybody's using. To know what kind of that basis is, I think is really, really important.
And I'm sure, like everyone, it doesn't seem to matter who I talk to, but everybody has some horror story or knows someone that, maybe you don't know someone directly that, was scammed for big amounts of money, but we know someone that knows someone, right? And then I think, how does that play into the role of, like, do you find that your staff are fearful, or like, how do you combat, that knowledge and information, and then kind of putting in those, I guess it's like a checkpoints, right, for your staff? How do you manage that?
It's interesting. We've been fairly lucky with the boarding kennels in that we're working with some fairly solid software that we haven't had a lot of issues with. But I think of one of the organizations that I contract with where leadership don't have a lot of understanding and capacity in that area. So when things are happening, it's very reactive. And so in one of the organizations, we have somebody who's fairly technological, and he put a bunch of things in place, and we still had phishing come through. And it was a staff member who didn't understand that, no, don't click on anything, like don't, even if you think about it. So that the multiple levels of the organization, from people that are just working on files or creating documents to those that are in leadership, I can see a real big challenge on finding a way to make sure that the capacity and understanding at all levels is where it needs to be. But it's so ever changing that it can seem very impossible to make sure that everybody is up to date on what they need to be doing or what we should be using to make sure that what we're doing is safe and not going to be used in an inappropriate way.
From my standpoint, just further to what Valerie was just saying, it's very, very hard for us to be proficient in everything. So when you're developing a team, especially if you're looking at internet security, Learn Online Security and the other teams that Richards has in that regards, or other organizations like that, having them on your team as partners is hugely important, because all you need is somebody to go to say, got this email, should I open it? Got this email, should I open it? And there's people out there, there's organizations like Richard's teams that will help you navigate through that to mitigate your risk. Nothing is foolproof, but we can't know everything. We can't learn everything. Learn Online Security will get you to the point where you know that you should, oh, wait, stop. I'm going to ask the question next.
And so how important is, and maybe it seems like a silly question to ask, but how important is being preventative versus reactive? Because you see it firsthand, right?
Mm-hmm.
For most businesses, in my opinion, for most businesses in Manitoba especially, yeah, we have some huge super corporations that have very, very deep pockets, but most of us don't, right? Most of us are doing this because we're passionate about what we're doing, and we're hoping to make a living as we go along. So getting scammed, getting hacked can be the end. It can literally sink that ship. So I would liken it to, whatever disease that you want to talk about, whether it's COVID or typhoid fever, whatever. You bring that into a hospital unchecked, you're going to have mass casualties. Mm-hmm. If you let your IT in your small business, medium business run rampant, you're going to have mass casualties.
And that can be just as devastating as, like you said, like an illness, or like losing your pension, or something that you don't have time to recover from.
It can be critical.
Yeah.
It really can. And we've seen that happen, unfortunately.
And I think that's too, what we're all trying to avoid here, as far as the podcast and trying to be preventative, and the more that it gets talked about, the more people realize and maybe are less fearful, right, of learning. Because I think my best way of describing it is, and I had talked to Richard about it before. So when he brought me in as a show host, the cool thing is I don't know a lot about this stuff. And so I would ask the most natural question, because I don't know, right? I don't know how his team's brains work. I don't know their processes. I don't know any of that stuff. But what I do know is, as a consumer, as someone that has my own businesses and, you're trying to keep track of things yourself, you do need a team. I think it's really interesting that you would say that. And so learning to trust the right people, that would probably be a big factor.
Yeah. If you try and do it all on your own, generally speaking, if you don't fail, you won't be as successful as you could. Further to that, in rare leadership, Valerie and I will say that a leader's most important job is to make sure that their team, each and every day, they come in feeling valued, feeling that they add value, and leaving wanting to come back again the next day. Most businesses can't succeed without their employees, without their team. They need them there to function the day-to-day and to serve their clientele or their mission, whichever it may be. So if part of your team, even one of your team, let alone more than that, errs on a technology base and you get hacked or you get phished or ransomware, whatever it may be, you may have insurance to cover it, true enough. But that may take 30, 45, 60 or longer days to check in. What if now we can't pay that team? What about that team member that made the mistake, a simple mistake that we can all make, that caused that? How are they going to feel? Are they going to feel valued or that they added value? Are they going to want to come back tomorrow? No. We need to stand up, step up, and give them the tools and the resources. Things like that start with the online education, like Learn Online Security, that can give them the confidence to say, I don't know what I'm dealing with. I need to ask somebody before I open that Word document or click that link or whatever it may be.
And it's probably fair to say, to admit stuff like that, because I think we're expected to know so much, even when we work for anyone, right? And I think it's very hard for adults, never mind young adults, but adults to say I don't know what I'm doing, or I don't, right? It's very humbling.
Yeah, I was actually going to say the vulnerability, and it sounds silly to say that there's vulnerability aligned with technology, but there is. People think they know technology because they have their phones and they're using their phones every day. But there's so much more past that and deeper into that actually are the technology. We can handle them at the materials. I can't think of what the word I'm thinking about. The equipment. But when it comes to the actual inner workings of it, the greater majority of us don't have an understanding. But to be vulnerable to go, you know what, I don't think I really know how that works, is really, really tough, especially when people want to keep their jobs. I don't want to admit that I don't know something. Mm-hmm. So then as leaders, we need to be proactive instead of reactive and make sure that we're providing the support that we need to our staff so that they feel okay coming to us and saying, I'm not really sure how that works. Can you help me? No, we can't, but we know somebody who can. And having those connections and partnerships, I think, are invaluable for whether you're a small business, a medium business, or a large business. I think sometimes even larger businesses, that gets lost because there are so many minions that are working that we don't see. That do they actually get the support that they need for technology because it's so ever changing?
So then moving into when it comes to your employees, you talk about support and you talk about that relationship. And I kind of want to just take a look at that because having that relationship with your staff, right? Of actually where they feel that comfort to go to you. So you that takes a lot to establish that with many people, right? To earn trust where they're not going to be embarrassed or they're going to feel like they're ignorant of something or they're going to be singled out in a group. Even if you work remotely, right? We know with Teams and stuff, you get on a Teams meeting and you're all there, whether you're not there in person, but everybody can hear what everyone's saying. And, so how do you build that? Because with leadership, I feel like you guys would have a real understanding of that.
Isn't it sad that we even have to have this conversation? Isn't it sad that people in our culture honestly can't feel safe being real and honest? I mean, for me, it's disappointing, right? If you're not expected, you should never be expected to know everything. If you know everything, I'd call you God. So if I hired somebody that knew everything, I should just sell them my business and walk away because I don't know everything. In any aspect of the companies that we run, the consulting that we do, I don't know everything. And if you cannot feel comfortable going to your leadership team with a problem, with a question, whether it's work-related or personal, it's sad. to me.
I think that the world has changed a lot, though. Like, I think about 10, 20 years ago, I didn't even have a cell phone, right? And so everything was verbal. Everything was like, emails were fairly new. I hated them. I wouldn't touch them like 20 years ago. I couldn't be bothered, and I was never a great typer in school. So I was not very fond of it. But there was a lot more in person. So, I mean, there are challenges that come from the remote work because we aren't in-house with our colleagues all the time, right? And so the world, so you say it's sad, but it is actually like this, connected to technology.
And I know that in a previous role as a staff, we kind of made a game plan as to how are we going to connect, because you lose that connectivity. When you're working remote, you can feel very isolated, especially if you're in a hole and you're having trouble with a project and you're not vulnerable, don't feel vulnerable enough to be able to go and ask for support. You can get pretty stuck in that space. So we actually used Teams as our main source of file sharing. And we had a Teams channel called the water cooler. And it was a space where when you just needed to just kind of grab a coffee and sit and just be with people, you could go there, and there was usually 2 or 3 people there during the day at different times, and you just had a virtual conversation. Sometimes we would do a video chat, but it was the water cooler, and that was our way of keeping connected, because we realized really quickly how isolated we were and how you can feel very alone. And sometimes that's when those little mistakes happen, is when you don't have those conversations of the person at the desk beside you to ask right away. It's like, oh man, I've got to figure out who's got time for me, who's not online, who's got work. How can I click on somebody and chat with them about a problem I have? And so you have to be really super intentional. In my experience, not a lot of opportunities like that exist within some of those workspaces.
Well, I even think of that totally brings to mind watching my daughter in school. And she was explaining to me how different, like, she was used to having at least one friend beside her, that if anything happened, she could ask. And this is going into high school. And she said, going into a class where you don't know anyone very well, and then you're kind of too afraid to ask, and it does inhibit learning. So I think that's a really valid point in the team building with trying to create this trust so that they can ask about the technological concerns, or they get an email that they're just like, but is this so and so, or like.
We went from this really awkward, strange pandemic for a number of years, where we were all in this lockdown and we didn't have this connection. And a large amount of the people and corporations are saying, hey, I don't need physical bricks and mortar. You can all work from home, and we can kind of trim the costs a little bit and not have this fixed overhead, and there's value in it. But I think we've transitioned from this COVID pandemic to truly a mental health pandemic. And if we're going to connect primarily through technology, that makes making that technology secure and having confidence in it that much more important.
And then also the confidence in the people behind the camera, right?
Oh,
Getting
yeah,
to know
sure.
them, which I really like that whole idea with that water cooler. That's really cool. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. This has just been an enlightening conversation, and I'm actually excited to learn a little bit more. So now we are going to the hero portion of our show with David and Valerie, and we are talking about personal and professional growth for staff and why it's so important.